G'day, I'm Tricia Reust. I'm going to be showing you how I use Atelier Acrylic paint in place of printing ink for my printing. The reason I do it is because acrylic paint is stable when it's dry, so that the surface doesn't wake up and mix with anything wet that I place over it. And also the range of colours means that I can use my prints either by themselves, under drawings, or in my mixed media process, and I can harmonise my colours with the basic painting. For lino prints, this is Payne's Grey, and you can see how beautifully that's come out, and that's on a heavier cartridge paper. This is a lino print with the lino that's been adhered to a board, and that gives you a completely different surface, and that's on a piece of handmade paper. And then if you have something a lot more intricate, this is another lino piece, and you can see how beautifully the Payne's Grey, and that's on a very thin piece of cartridge paper. So if you're going to be using your paint for a smooth surface like a lino print or a woodcut, you just simply put the paint out as is, get your brayer, and you work with that acrylic paint, lifting the brayer up so that lots of air gets into that resulting level of paint. So it starts to have a really great, even, sticky, tactile surface. You can see how beautifully dark and thick that is. I use intense transparent color, so if you're rolling your color out and you can see the color of it, that's not dark enough. It should be almost black. So that's ready to go. So we'll just get a cut piece of lino, and we place the paint all the way over the surface, making sure that all areas of the lino are covered. Now this paint is straight from the tube. It hasn't got any medium or anything in it. So that is a really lovely, even covering. We place it on regular, centering the lino so that it's lovely and straight edged, and then we're going to print it with a brayer. For paper, a brayer works much better for printing. All of these methods are no press printing, which makes them a lot easier and immediate, and I can use them almost straight away in my painting process. So we've got, and we have the paint, the print. There's enough paint here that I can re-apply the paint, and I'm just going to put the second. It'll be almost like a ghost print. It won't be as defined as the first one. Just making sure I've got really nice even covering. And you know, it's so easy to clean up acrylic paint. So we're just going to use an old music sheet for this. Line it up, print with a brayer. I'll be showing you later how I use other heavier things if you don't have a brayer. A brayer is just like a really heavy rubber roller. So that print on the paper is a beautiful addition to a mixed media piece. All of this paint left on here doesn't have to be wasted. When I'm cleaning my brayer, I like to just get my visual diary and just use the brayer to start to make shapes And these pieces of paper I take to life drawing, or I just look for to make beautiful backgrounds for drawings in the future. Now this is got hardly any ink on it. I'm just going to place it in a flat dish with paper toweling. All of this paint, however, that's on the palette, I'm just going to put lines through that, and I'm going to spread some of that paint around. This is just a disposable palette. Once again, this is a piece of Canson Mitant paper. I'm just going to do a mono print so that this piece of paper will have a beautiful painterly design on it that I can take to a drawing session, and I haven't wasted the residual paint that's been left on the palette. So we have a mono print on a piece of thicker paper that's ready for a drawing. When you're working on canvas or when you have a colograph, however, the paint needs to be wetter without losing its chroma intensity. So for a colograph is just, it's derived from collage, so you collage texture objects on a firm base. Of course, something this thick won't go through a print, so it's ideal for our purposes that we're talking about today. And that's that colograph. You need a paint that's a little more wet. So what we do this time, we use our clear painting medium along with the paint. I'll do a different color this time. This time I'm using phthalo turquoise, and we're going to use this paint to make a colograph print on paper, and we're going to use it to print also on canvas. The canvas has a texture and the colograph has a texture, so we need the paint to be more wet. We use a sponge roller this time, and we have to just work the air. See how I'm lifting the roller so that I can get as much air into this as possible. And once that has a beautiful even consistency, sticky, exactly like you do with your printing ink, only of course this is, and that's, see how we can see the color around the edge? We need a little more paint to make it deeper. I use intense transparent paints for all of my printing. Oh, that's beautiful. You can see the gorgeous stickiness. So that's ready to go, and that's going to stay workable for a little longer than paint brought out straight from the tube, because it's got that medium in with it. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to print the colograph. So we just run our paint straight over the colograph with the sponge roller. And you can see how it's going on a lot more easily because it's got that medium in it, so it's perfect when we're talking about texture. Line that up straight. I like to sort of figure out where the edges are with the brayer. I can see it coming through the paper. And then I can work around the different areas of texture looking for a print. These prints can either stay on the paper and just exist as prints, or you can then use them as collage elements on larger art pieces. So that's our, you can see the difference in the colours. Now for painting on canvas, we're just going to reactivate this paint, put a little more paint on our palette, couple more drops of the clear painting medium. Reactivate this paint so that it's beautiful and fresh and thick again. Now these are plates made out of styrofoam, and they're just incised. That's this one that's been printed on paper. We're going to use this one and we're going to print it on canvas. So we cover the styrofoam plate with a beautiful even covering of paint, making sure we've got all the edges. I like to hold it up to the light just to make sure I've got a really nice, that's really beautiful, a really even covering. I'll just get the canvas, we'll place it, we'll just put a piece of paper towel over it so that we don't get any of that paint on the brayer. Now you can print this with the brayer like I'm doing. If you don't have a brayer, something round with a beautiful flat surface and heavy will also, I think I just shifted it, will also give you a beautiful even. See how I'm going around, making sure I've got it even. I'm going to get a piece of tissue paper, white tissue paper, that's the print on the canvas. Immediately place tissue paper over your styrofoam plate and just print it lightly with your fingers. Don't do this with a brayer, because if you do this with a brayer or something heavy, the tissue paper will be stuck too hard and you won't be able to get it off the plate. You can see when the paint has come successfully onto the tissue paper on the back side, just peel it off really carefully, and you have your ghost print on tissue paper. And what we do with that, with Atelier binder medium, we then use them in mixed media collage. This is the original print that has been printed onto the canvas. This is the ghost print that has been collaged onto the canvas, because once you put the binder medium onto the white tissue paper disappears and you get all that beautiful color coming through from underneath. So this is a still life motif to go with the still life. I'll show you one more. This is a more of a landscape feel. So this particular print that we've just used, here it is placed straight onto the canvas, and here it is the ghost print with the tissue. Repetition is a very important element of design. You can actually make the print be the whole reason for the canvas, so that this is a design-oriented canvas piece that doesn't have a motive apart from the print that has been applied to the canvas. A really lovely way to use the paint up from this sort of thing is to get a piece of watercolor paper. Moisten your leftovers on the palette. Moisten some areas of your watercolor paper. Push this around in a beautiful design with a wet brush. Place your watercolor paper over your palette and then print a monoprint on the watercolor paper. It's going to have a completely different surface and feeling to the monoprint that we did from the paint that had no medium in it and had no water on it. I love to do work on paper that has already got a shape, an abstract shape on it, over which I then draw or paint a motif. And this is a perfect way to get those pieces of paper ready without wasting paint. So we have a beautiful monoprint. Can you see that? Beautiful monoprint on our watercolor paper from our palette. Now I'm just going to do it on a piece of regular visual diary paper. I really like this area here. So I'm just going to do another monoprint now that there's not so much water, there's less likelihood of this thinner paper buckling. So I have a beautiful monoprint on drawing paper. There's still a little bit of paper there. This is a thicker handmade paper. Just going to get this last little bit of paper, paint. Those who know me know I very rarely waste anything. One last monoprint from this beautiful phthalo turquoise Atelier paint, and then we still have lovely, and I'll wash that off later. The next thing I'm going to show you is what I do with children. Children love the immediacy of printing, but they also love bright colour. So with children I use free flow paint. Children love to create their own collagraphs. Here's a couple that I've created with my grandchildren. This is one of their favourite, and we've just used the little pieces of wood from the back of a canvas, and they're adhered to a stable block. And these are more pieces of wood that have just been adhered to something so that the child can hang on to it really well. And that's a print from this collograph. I'm just going to print a leaf and a collograph. For children, a really easy way to print is using free flow straight from the bottle. What you lose with the free flow is some detail in your print, but for children what you gain is the immediacy and the love and the ease, plus easy cleanup. So I've just put out a little bit to make sure that the roller is completely saturated. We have another run. Remember, this is free flow straight from the bottle. We have to make sure that it's just as dark as the intense transparent colours were with the Atelier Interactive. Now that's really lovely. So we just roll the paint onto a leaf. This is just regular cartridge paper. Place the leaf, place a piece of clean paper to protect the brayer, and we print that leaf the same way, and we have the print of the leaf. For the children's collograph, it's the same thing. You just make sure that you get a really good covering of paint. Then this is straight free flow. The children, well, you can see what colors they love: red and yellow, blue, and it's lovely and wet, this paint. I have a piece of handmade paper here, so we will print that collograph. Children come up with beautiful designs for themselves. Just get some textured elements, give them a piece of card or something and some PVA, and they'll make their own collograph, and the joy in printing it is just amazing. So that's the free flow used with the sponge roller. If the children happen to get a mess anywhere, the best thing for cleaning is the incredible brush cleaner. This cleans dried paint from your brushes and from your dried brayers, but it also gets paint out of children's clothes, and I've even got paint out of a carpet with that. Now the last thing I want to show you is how, if I create a collograph that has got just really minimal texture. I don't know if you can see, but this is feathers, very low grade canvas for needlework, a bit of string and a paper clip. This sort of really thin layer would not print well on canvas, so it's just for paper, but it's such a delicate thing. How to do this is you must use a bit of retarder medium, because we need the paint to stay wet for quite some time. So we use retarder, a couple of drops just to keep it wet. And we use a thick bristle brush. Mix that retarder into the paint because we're going to just use the brush to catch this paint over the surface. So this takes a bit of time, so you need that paint to stay wet while you apply it over the really thin elements. Because this is so thin, we have to use a brayer for the paper to get into all those areas of, can you see all those really lovely fine spidery lines? So we're just catching the tip of that with the brush, and this paint is going to stay workable for longer because we've added the retarder. Make sure we get all those beautiful lines. Just print this on regular cartridge paper with the brayer. Once again, I make sure I find where the edges of my plate are. You can't do this with the paint as prepared previously in this demonstration because the paint is too thick for something so delicate. So when you want a really beautiful, delicate calligraphic print, perhaps you're going to use it in a mixed media on paper. Might be a bit lost if you use it on canvas, but it's well worth pursuing this. And of course, once it's collaged onto your canvas, you need it to have been done with paint, because obviously you're going to do other layers of paint and other applications, and you don't want it to wake up like printer's ink. You want it to stay stable once it's dry, which is what happens when you use the paint. So we have a really beautiful, delicate, linear print that's been produced on a really thin layer of texture. So hopefully you've enjoyed all the different ways that we can use Atelier paint for printing, and I hope you've received some inspiration so that you can go ahead and enjoy. Thank you very much.